strange words that Dylan wrote, you know, songs like Desolation Row, and brought him into all that. And then I drove him down to record stores. We walked San Fernando Street and a few others near San Jose State College, and I knew how to ask for bootleg records because I'd bought them before. And then we went in Berkeley and we bought bootleg records, and I shared all that Dylan stuff with him, and we became big Dylan fans. And he said, "Do you think Dylan or the Beatles are more important?" And I said, "Oh, Dylan, you know, because I'm into words and the lyrics and the meaning. And they have life." And he says, "Yeah, Beatles is nice music, but we both agreed. Dylan was the place to be, you know, for us. We were more into the intellectual side of songs like Dylan than the little Beatles pop stuff. So why do they portray me as being Beatles pop in that car? It's okay. You know, it's okay to portray somebody there. They had Steve Jobs right. They just had me the wrong person."
Right. After the Homebrew Computer Club meeting, Paul Terrell, who ran the Byte Shop, stops one of you. Now, in the movie, he stops Steve Jobs.
This is correct. Well, Paul Terrell had been watching me at the club. He knew about the computer. I had not become personal friends with him. There were a lot of stages that are left out of here. How did this become a company? Because I worked for Hewlett-Packard, and I wasn't going to start a company and then get fired for having a company on the side. So I offered the computer to my company first, and they turned me down a lot of times, but they wouldn't have built the nice, fun machine a personal computer is supposed to be. They would have built a tool for engineers. So it's a good thing they turned us down. And then we were in business. We decided to go into business, but Steve's idea was to build a PC board for $20 and sell it for $40. We'd have to put in a few $100 each, maybe $1,000 total. We'd make maybe 100 PC boards, and if we sold 50 of them, we would get our money back. That's what we needed to break even. Didn't know if we'd do it. He didn't know if we'd do it, you know, but heck, we wanted our own company. We've been doing things together for a long time, so Apple started. Now we made a PC board. I took it in, showed it to my engineer friends at HP, and the phone rang. And Steve said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Okay." And he said, "Well, I got a $50,000 order." $50,000 when you have no money in the bank, no savings accounts, no relatives and friends to loan you money. This was a shock. I was going to have to go back through HP's legal department to make sure I wouldn't lose my job at Hewlett-Packard. That was number one to me. And what happened was Steve kind of described it like he had gone in and told them they should sell completely built computers. But later on, what I found out was he was trying to sell them our board, our PC board, and the guy at the store said, "All these people are coming and buying kit computers. What they want is a complete built computer." And so Steve said, "Well, we can give you a complete built computer." So Paul Terrell was the idea, saying this is what people really want. And we gave them a completely built board. That means all the parts and components are soldered onto it, but you still had to know enough to hook wires over to transformers, a television of some sort, and a keyboard. You kind of had to supply a wooden case. So the store, in the end, not only bought them from us for $500, but then they had to buy a wooden case from somebody who would make some wooden cases, buy a few transformers from Radio Shack, and maybe a little monitor to put it into a TV set, a modulator. It's called, because TVs didn't have video in those days. They only had an antenna. You had to broadcast on channel 3 or channel 33
I remember
or something.
that. I had like a little box. It would be channel 3 or 4, and then you'd switch TV or computer.
So Paul Terrell in his Byte Shop in Mountain View would sell the complete setup, kind of like IKEA. You have to put a few pieces together, but not too hard.
So they'd sell your computer with their monitor and their keyboard and their case.
Yeah, they sold the whole thing. They might have sold it complete. I never went down to the store to see. They might have sold it just here it is.
You didn't
take
need
it home
a monitor.
and plug it
It
in.
worked with your TV set.
Yeah, it worked with your TV. No monitor even. That was one of the real keys to making it affordable.
You couldn't even buy a monitor, really.
So
you're selling for $500 a piece, right?
Yes, and you know what? And yeah, Steve told me that Paul was a little bit upset because he had been expecting that we were going to deliver a complete computer in a case. Like the one I'd been showing off at the club, you know, Randy Wigginton's father had made me a wooden case, you know, with the keyboard. It kind of looked like a typewriter.
And it wasn't $500, it was $666.
No, it was $500 wholesale to Paul Terrell. And then we said, what should we make for a retail price? Add a third, that makes it $667. And I was into repeating digits, so $666.66.
Not the mark of the beast.
Right. So when you want to start building these, Steve Jobs and Daniel, they were living together, and then they moved into Steve's parents' garage to build these, right?
Yeah, Daniel wasn't around when we did the first couple prototypes, but we got the boards, and they were for $13. Every part was soldered into the board, except the chips had sockets. So we had all these chips, and then we went to, we paid Steve's daughter Patty, sister Patty, we paid her to plug $1 a board to plug in the chips to the first set of boards. I don't know if she did 10 boards, 25, 5, 3, whatever.
Yeah.
So the first boards, and then Dan showed up. Steve wanted Dan to come out and help out. It's time to have somebody help us. So Dan showed up, and we set up the table out in the garage. And then Dan would be, from then on, I think Dan was the one who's plugging in the chips and testing them.
So it
I
started
was
out,
the first tester. I had to
Right.
teach him what to look for.
So it starts out in the garage with Steve Jobs, you, Bill Fernandez, Daniel, Chris Espinosa, all working there in the garage, right?
It was
And
that was, it's time compression.
Yeah.
The movie has to only.
Right.
Chris came by at least once that I remember,
Yeah.
and could type in a few things, but he wasn't really working like. It was more like he was part of the interested community.
Well, he was 14 years old, for one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We invited Chris to be on the show because he's still at Apple, but Apple said he's not allowed to be on the show, so he couldn't come. Unfortunately. So is
complicated.
it true that Chris worked for free at the beginning, or did you pay him
Well,
money?
No, I'm sure he just came by to see what we were doing, really.
Yeah.
No, and Bill Fernandez, I'm not sure if he ever came to the garage. Bill was the one that introduced me to Steve. Bill worked as a technician in my group at Hewlett Packard for me.
Okay.
And and I suggested him, so when we started Apple, I said, this was later on when we started Apple with money. The second start, the corporation with the Apple II. So Bill Fernandez came along at a later time, but I don't remember him doing anything on the Apple I's. He certainly knew about them because I was well known for having done it in my group at Hewlett Packard, where Bill worked.
Okay.
Bill told me he did work in the garage in the spring of '77. I don't know. I think, the first Apple II boards needed some massaging. Rod Holt, right? Rod Holt had
That was after
for
we
Apple
brought
II,
in,
yeah.
because Bill Fernandez really was employee number 3. He had agreed to come with Steve and I, but he had to wait to a certain date that Hewlett Packard would let him go.
Okay.
So in the meantime, our investor, Mike Markula, was sort of the third one sitting down in our new little office building we'd gotten, and he was sort of like the third one on the spot as employee number 3, and Bill got number 4. But no, Bill was as early as could be, so willing to join us, take the risk.
In the movie, when you delivered the Apple I boards to Paul Terrell, in the movie, he's complaining that's not a complete computer. And he goes, they're just boards, not computers.
The Apple I, not the Apple II.
The Apple I, right. In the movie, you were complaining, about the Apple I. Like, it's not just a board. How dare you? This is high technology. You've never seen anything like this before.
I never came close to dealing with sales, finance, any of that stuff. You know what? No, that was Steve's end.
Okay.
I had so much to constantly develop on my end. My head was sunk into it. No.
Well, here's
I would not even talk that way anyway. I would just sort of agree.
Here's a good question, though. You probably would have advocated to Steve that you, meaning Apple, would actually sell it with the keyboard and the power supply, so it was a complete set of parts.
We would have, in those days, it was like we would have talked to each other about ideas and trade them off and see what makes sense. And we could have come to that conclusion, and it was pretty easy. But you have to remember, before we shipped an Apple I, we had the Apple II working and demonstrated.
Okay.
Okay, so we knew that the real machine that would change the world. The Apple I was not designed to be a computer to change the world. It was a quick modification of a terminal I had to be my own computer. As quick as could be. That was the quickest, shortest step, but it wasn't really designed from the ground up like the Apple II. And the Apple II had so many incredible ideas. You know what? They weren't possible when the Apple I was built. Color. A lot of the way that the computer memory was on your screen wasn't possible with the Apple II. Had to do it by the time we built the Apple II. The memory could go at 2 million times a second, and the microprocessor only went at 1, so that left another 1 for the screen. I mean, it's hard to say, but anyway, the Apple II we knew was so great, and yet we had to market the Apple I in the meantime.
So in the movie, you see Steve Jobs leaving the bike shop and giving little hints to Paul Terrell that, the next one's going to be great, and he had already seen that's going to be color, and it's going to be an all-in-one, and that kind of thing.
You know what they left out? They left out PC-76. Dan and Steve were in a booth out in Atlantic City. My first airplane flight out of the state of California, except for a year at Colorado school. And so we're out in Atlantic City, and I'm up in my room in the hotel because I'm kind of shy. I don't like dealing with people. And I'm sitting there programming in new additions to the BASIC. Steve would run up and he'd get a brand new EEPROM and plug it in and have some more commands to show people. And he and Dan were showing off our computer, and we went down late at night. There was one guy with a projector. I had come up with a strange way of generating color that was unlike anything ever in any book. In the books, you gave a number to a device that converted it into sine waves of certain types that showed up as color on your TV set. What I did was I just took a number and I said, send the number out, and it shows up as color because of the way TVs work. And it would have to work, but would it work on this projection TV? We went down late at night when nobody was around, because all these other people, two people like us, two young people, had little companies, with pieces of hardware. Went down and we hooked it up to this guy's projector, and it worked. And he said, this is the computer I want. It was the Apple II, which was not being shown at the show.
You brought the Apple II prototype?
Yes,
you brought it to Atlantic City?
Yes,
You'd be fired for that now.
And we showed it. And but the guy said he saw every one of the little starting computer attempts, including the Apple I, and he said, "This is the one I want." The color and the games. I mean, so
wow.
But we still wanted to market the Apple I because we had started on it. It was business. I wasn't going to interfere with that, and we made some money.
So when you started working on the Apple II, that's when, I guess, Rod Holt came into the scene? He was
yes.
your power supply designer?
The Apple II, we started heading towards having a real company. And before Rod Holt, it was financing. Mike Markkula was shown in the movie, and Steve Jobs says, I got this guy, and I dictate the terms. Like he was dictating the terms, and he was the leader. No, Mike Markkula was the leader. He was the financial, he had a lot of experience in investing, and he knew how to set up a company. He was also a very nice guy, and I'm glad that he saw in Steve Jobs what people like Nolan Bushnell at Atari did. And so Mike put the money in. Now the plan was, Steve had this plan it was his own idea, a plastic case for a computer, which had never been done. And Steve knew of these guys that pressed motorcycle seats with a foam process. And this guy could actually press the foam into cases. The trouble is they don't all kind of come out the exact same shape. There's a lot of problems with that process, and you can only make a certain amount a day. But we were going to have a plastic case, and Steve had a friend at Atari, Rod Holt. He had a few friends there. And Rod was a guy that knew how to design a new type of power supply, a switching power supply. I had just designed the old linear, normal type of power supply myself. But the switching power supply cost more money, but it ran cooler. It was high-tech instead of low-tech. And oh my gosh, and Steve wanted to go for the high-tech approach. And one thing it gave us was it would keep things cool inside the plastic. We wouldn't need a fan, which became a mantra of Apple for a long time. And by bringing in, basically we used brains to do things that other people weren't doing with their computers. Rod came in and designed that switching power supply, and I remember talking to him at night, and he would tell me how he was a communist. And actually, I admired him as an engineer. So I started giving a lot of validity. There must be some validity from a logical thinking point of view to communism. I've never had time to go research it and read Marx and all that stuff, but it's probably not too illogical.
Rod later became the publisher of Socialist Viewpoint magazine.
I don't know that. Yeah. I'm not political, so.
So before the Apple II launched, Steve Jobs is seen as saying that the Apple I is being sold in 6 stores. Is that correct, or are you only being sold in the Bite Shop?
Oh, before the Apple IIs launched, we got into stores out in, the Midwest, Wisconsin or something, New York. He had one favorite guy in New York City.
I see.
I drove down once to Southern California where I had relatives, and I stopped by this one thing said computer store or something computers in Orange. The city of Orange, I think. And I drove in and I showed him the Apple I, which I was carrying with me, and what it would do and how you could play Star Trek on it. And that guy ordered 10 or 12 or 15 of our Apple I computers, and he set them up and charged people to come in after school and play this text game. Black and white text game, Star Trek on them. So that was another place. So we had sales, I think, all over the place. Steve would get on the phone anytime a new store opened in the country. Remember, this was a new business. Nothing existed. There weren't stores where they were sold. A new store would pop up, and Steve would get on the phone, tell him what we could ship you for how much money and probably what terms. And that was, he did all the business. Yeah. His room, the phone in his room was busy.
Right. So the movie switches now. And we cut to a scene where Chris Ann tells Steve Jobs that she's pregnant.
Let's see.
Quite a dramatic scene.
It's
Wait,
1977.
Chris Ann tells Steve Jobs that she's pregnant. And then Jobs says it's not his child. And so then he like yells at her and throws her out of the house. I guess the three of you were living together, right?
Yeah. No, he didn't throw her out, but he was mean.
Yeah. And at this point, you know, you were the one comforting Chris Ann.
I tried to actually kind of stay in the middle of the two of them.
By this point in time, Steve was worth a bit of money, and he probably wanted an abortion, and maybe she had an abortion before.
Really?
So she wasn't against it. And I think that bothered Steve that this time she was not going to have the abortion because maybe he had the money.
Oh, okay.
And Chris Ann has a book coming out in a couple of weeks that tells her side of the story.
Okay. And I think you've told me once that you think you and Steve grew apart because, you know, he was mean to her and you were trying to, you know, be nice to her.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
No?
People speculate that.
Oh.
I don't actually think so.
So I heard
I
that.
was,
No,
you know, the dynamic was Steve and I had a very similar sense of humor. And Steve and I and Chris Ann spent a lot of time together. And Chris Ann was always feeling like Steve and I were ganging up on her, which really wasn't true. It's just that we had the same kind of sense of humor. And
I never got that from, I was working right in the lab with Dan at the time, and he never came across that way. He was a little bit wondering why Steve didn't denied it, though. You know, it was so obviously, you know,
What?
his child.
So you think Steve really thought it wasn't his child, or do you think he just couldn't handle
I think he just couldn't handle it.
So he knew it was his, but
Chris Ann didn't have any other boyfriends,
Yeah.
and he didn't have any other, you know.
Right.
I don't know.
All right.
It did cost Steve quite a bit, though,
Oh yeah.
because, yes, they were, Time Magazine decided to make him Man of the Year. Michael Moritz came out and talked to a lot of people and heard stories about how little he'd paid off and denied this child and all that. And those sort of things, they decided instead of making him Man of the Year, they made it Machine of the Year on Time Magazine.
Oh.
They changed their direction. They wrote a real scathing article inside, basically based on this baby and denial and
Right.
low payment, low settlement.
So then in the movie, they jump to the West Coast Computer Fair in 1977, where you have the first public unveiling of the Apple II. Is that correct?
I don't think there ever was a speech like there was in the movie.
No, no speech.
They had Steve
Yeah.
like giving a launch, and there wasn't really
Just a bunch of
anything like that.
booths
I
in a
was
room.
there.
As a matter of fact, I think even before Mike Markla put his money in, Steve and I had sat down and looked over where you could get the booths, and there was one premier spot, and we had selected, let's get that. And Steve wasn't sure if we wanted to spend that much money, and I said, we should. And we both were for it, yeah. So we had the prime spot in the show, and we knew we had the product. We knew we had the product that was going to change the world.
And that's the first time people saw it at the computer fair.
Yeah, and you know, it was still a techie world where people just wanted to come and see what was this all about. I thought it was unbelievable, thousands of people, you know. And Mike Markla, our funder, who had said things like, in 5 years we'll be a $500 million company. As we were leaving that show, all we've done is show this little computer that you can type a few programs in and run things. We're leaving the show, and Mike Markla put his arm across my shoulder, and he said, you know, he could tell from that show it's going to happen. This is going to be the new next market. Yeah.
He was right.
So then the movie jumps from there straight to 1980. We see Steve Jobs parking in a handicapped spot, which he did, because when I worked at Apple, I'd always walk by his handicapped spot, and his silver Mercedes would be parked there with no license plates.
Right.
So that part is true. And now 1980, it shows him starting to work on the Lisa. That's what the time he started working on Lisa.
Actually, before that, Lisa, people were working on Lisa toward the end of '78.
Okay.
So quite a bit before that.
Yeah, Steve was very, very anxious from the early days of the computer, you know, that, somebody's going to be competition, we've got to move, we've got to design new things, make newer things, and that he moved us into the Apple III first, which was a business version of the Apple II. And it kind of died. We don't have to go into all the reasons. But then,
But
there was
you
this guy,
did
Jeff
you not
Ransom.
like the Apple III? We all loved it. We thought it was great because it had all the things built in. Right?
I love the Apple.
You know
I
what? I would have loved the Apple III, except for I loved my Apple II software.
Yeah.
and I loved the Apple II also, and the Apple
Right.
III, to get around that, built in the Apple II, but wrongly, and limited, and cut out the features you wanted. So it was a bad Apple II, and it also failed in hardware on day one, and once you get a bad name, it's so hard to ever build the market that it deserved. It was not a bad computer. It was a good computer. I absolutely say that, but anyway, you need software, and it takes time to build a market for that. So Steve, then Jeff Raskin had come into the company. He'd actually been around early. He came by the garage in the garage days once, and he told us how you've got to put a lot of work into your machines to make them so obvious they work simple for the person who hasn't had education, that doesn't know computers on the inside. And so Jeff Raskin was one of the key people that knew about what was going on at Xerox Park Center. And so he said, you've got to get down there, and basically led us to going down to see what Xerox Park Center had. You know, menus on a screen and multiple windows opening like you had more than one computer in one, and mouses, and it was just so impressive. You just knew if you had that, you'd never go back to what you had before.
So then they say, we see Steve Jobs
And that initiated the Lisa project.
working with the Lisa guys.
Lisa actually was started before the Xerox Park trip, and had a bitmap display before it, but no mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they saw the mouse?
we'd hired some pretty smart technical people and a few smart, what do you call it? Personal interface, you know, human using computer type
Bill
people.
Atkinson was really the key guy, and he was Jeff's student at UC San
UC
Diego.
San Diego,
Both
right.
Jeff and Bill and Bud
Yes.
Tribble, but Bud Tribble didn't come till a little later.
And then Steve fires a guy who doesn't think they can do fonts because that guy didn't share
I
the
think
passion.
that's made
They
up.
just made that up.
But they did actually fire Lisa engineering manager who didn't want to add the mouse.
Oh,
Bill Atkinson tells that story that
Really?
the guy didn't want to do the mouse. The engineering's too complicated, and Bill mentioned it to Steve, and then the next thing you heard, the guy was gone.
we asked Bill Atkinson to be on the show tonight, but he responded saying, "I live in New Mexico."
Really?
He does, along with Bill Fernandez?
Now you're talking Bill Fernandez.
Oh, I messed him up.
Yeah,
Sorry,
right,
Bill
right,
Fernandez is in New Mexico. Bill Atkinson, he lives in Oregon now.
He lives in
No,
Woodside.
no,
Woodside.
No, he still lives.
I could have
same
had him
place
on the
as-
Busted.
Busted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time for a break?
Maybe we should stop for a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Apple IPO. You don't want to miss that.
You already did.
All right.
I
How
go to
we-
the bathroom.
Oh, you want to do a bathroom break? Yeah.
I'd like to.
Okay.
Where is it?
So this is like
Go
how
into
it
the-
should have ended, the long
Go into the hallway where you first got into the building.
How it should
Right.
have ended, the long
Turn
what?
left to first right.
Seen that website, how it should have ended.
Just make the mic. Your mic
Watch out for your.
Movies.
Oh.
We got a guy there.
Anyone else need to go? Y'all have enough water?
Do we have enough tape running? Is it a 2-hour tape
Just
or
changing
1
the tape.
hour
It's a
tape?
1 hour tape.
Okay.
Hey,
1 hour tape. Wow.
So we're going to use up
so I don't have
2
to
of
get
them.
up? Can you just toss that somewhere else?
Does it feel like you've been going for an hour?
Well,
It doesn't hear.
It's been 55 minutes. Yeah. How long does it feel
about
for
right.
you?
It only does for me. The way I measure time is what I still have to do, and I have a speech tomorrow that I haven't written.
oh my gosh.
Now you should just take this recording and use it. It's pretty good.
Some of the guys you guys mentioned with, John Draper and all, I remember them very well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, actually, when we started Apple with the Apple II, AT&T got broken up. You were allowed to attach things to a phone. And I remembered my dial-a-joke. I wanted to take a computer to program a machine that put tones out to dial numbers, could answer the phone, could turn on and off relays to start and stop tape recorders, and interface them correctly to the phone line. Who knows phone circuits? John Draper. So I hired him at Apple
As long
in
as we
the
need.
earliest days, and they put just he and I
don't know.
and Randy Wigington in a little off office away from everybody else.
Oh, you don't?
And he developed the board. It was called the Charlie board, and it did things modems wouldn't do, like being able to hear if it got answered, if it was busy, if it was, you know, all those different tones on the line, and you could program it in BASIC to look for tones. Great board, yeah. But we never put it out because the people at Apple didn't like him, and it took more people to make a product than just designing it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, thanks to John Draper, I actually got my start in in the stock market.
Really?
he brought me into his little office. Remember that little shack of an office they had out in the middle of nowhere?
I don't know.
Okay, at any rate, the thing was, I saw the very, very, very first line printer. And I heard bap, 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 and paper was just flying. So I didn't invest in line printer. I went out and invested in the company that made the paper for the printer.
Good, good.
I mean, because it was going bap, 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 but just still a paper.
Might have been Call Computer where you were. He worked at Call Computer. I
Well,
remember
it's
though
just
when
a
he was
small-
in prison though, a couple of years later after he'd worked for me at Apple,
Yeah.
he called up crying that the computer I'd given him, the printer had broken or gotten stolen. And I felt so sorry for him. They'd just come out with the first letter quality printer. The first printer that was a reasonable cost that could make business quality documents.
Daisy wheel?
Yeah, yeah. No, it wasn't a daisy
Was
wheel.
it the
Yeah,
the modified
it wasn't
Selectric?
selected.
LQ or
It was daisy wheel.
What's that?
And so I actually had one. I bought one. I gave it to him. I said, "Here, take this. You can use this." Because he was in prison working on a word processor, and he was
Easy
so
writer.
sad that he was stymied.
Right.
When he got done, he had the only business word processor for the Apple II, and the Apple II sales were shooting up in the business market because of VisiCalc. So he made $1 million.
Well, no, and then the funniest
You made
thing,
$1 million
the
on it.
funniest thing about it was IBM picked Draper software
Yes.
to launch the IBM PC with,
Yeah.
and that's
That was
where
their
he really made the money.
their official word processor.
Just thinking about IBM and Draper together.
Yes. That's funny.
Makes me laugh.
Yes.
Where's one word for it? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2.
And we're back! And now we jump to the part of the movie where it's the IPO for Apple. Now we see Daniel, you're trying to meet up with Steve Jobs to say hi to him because you were good friends, and he's been blowing you off, I guess, for a long time. And you plan to meet at Good Earth. And I've eaten at Good Earth. And now it's a Panera Bread and a Pete's Coffee and Tea. But back then, and was he trying to dodge you at that point?
Yeah, he wouldn't talk to me anymore.
You want to talk to you anymore? What do you
I
think got between you? Just he was trying to associate himself with business people?
I
Or
don't
distance
think.
himself from
I
old
think
Might have been
he-
partly.
I think he just had his mind on other things. Really,
Yeah.
I just needed a little career advice.
Uh-huh.
You know, not like I expected anything in particular, but
Right.
he really just kept me waiting.